All right, I think there's a good amount of people here, so it's just about 1,800. We'll get started. All right, so for those of you that don't know me, I'm Lieutenant Bethany Kittrell, Warrant 2 Lieutenant type, so bosun mate. I took my boards and passed in 2012 in D9. Currently, I am stationed at the D9 Command Center as a CDO. Prior to that, I was the commanding officer of Station Marblehead. So I've been helping out with this OIC study group for a couple of years. Very excited to continue to help out, even though double turncoat going to the lieutenant side, but don't mind me. So after this, if anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to help out and continue to help anybody study or answer any questions that you guys might have. Coming up on 19 years next month in the Coast Guard. For those of you that are going to be taking the boards here in the next couple of months here in the spring, congratulations on taking this step. It's a big rewarding process for you guys, and I congratulate you just going to take the next step in your careers and doing this part and giving back to your guys' crew. I know Master Chief Ellis talked the other night about 80% of BM1s could probably take this test if it was a written test and pass it. I'm going to say that I have to agree with him. He talked about how Master Chief Hofling told him the same thing when he took over as Rating Force Master Chief. I know when I was preparing for the boards back in 2012, I reached out to someone who was going to be on my board and said, hey, can you help me out? Can you kind of give me a clue, like where should I get started? Where should I be studying? And that particular senior chief told me, you're a BM1, you're already doing the job every day. What you need to focus in on is your leadership and your judgment. Study that stuff, because everything else on the board, you're doing it every day. I couldn't agree more. And when I took my sector board, I remember I walked out and I was like, man, I feel like they set me up for failure when I go to the district, because I really feel like most of the questions that they ask me is everything I'm doing every day as a BM1. And then when I went to the district, it was the same thing. The hard part was really knowing to answer the questions as the officer in charge, and making sure that my answers really reflected who I was as a leader, and sticking to who I was as a leader, and making those judgment calls. And if you're not in your current position, you're not an XPO or ops, and you're not being, brought into the discussions with your commands, make sure you're going to your OIC and your XPO and asking to be brought in those discussions. If you're in a training petty officer or 1 LT position right now, ask to be brought into those discussions so that you're getting an opportunity to make those decisions, so that you have that experience underneath your belt. When you go to the board. I can't stress that enough, because I've sat on a lot of boards on the other side of the table, and I've seen the people that don't have that experience, and they kind of struggle in those questions. So enough on that. That's my advice for you. If you want some more advice, please feel free to reach out. But we're here to talk about SAR policies today. I saw a couple people threw a couple questions on the board today, on the discussion board on the OIC page. So I'll try to hit on a couple of those things and kind of back it up with the policy. Some great discussions there. I know that there was one just thrown on here a couple minutes ago that talked about warranted risk, so we'll go into a little bit about that. There was one in there about the MAR policy and towing, so we'll try to hit that and back it up with policy. And then obviously, as an OIC, talking about where you are with the judgment, and what you're going to allow your crew, where your crew is going to operate in that gray zone. So a couple of references for today's training. Predominantly, most of the stuff is going to come out of the SAR addendum, which is actually the U.S. Coast Guard addendum to the National Search and Rescue Manual. And most of the stuff, the SAR addendum is huge if you guys have never taken the chance to actually read it. But if I can hone you in on one area, it's going to be Chapter 4, which is going to be your general SAR policies. If you guys can read through Chapter 4 when you're studying, have a general understanding of what Chapter 4 talks about, you're going to be in the right area. That's where you guys need to be studying for the SAR policy. So Chapter 4 of the SAR addendum, and then also the boat manual is going to talk about your responsibilities as an officer in charge when it comes to SAR, and then also a little bit of Coast Guard regs. Talks about your responsibilities as an officer in charge when it comes to SAR. So the Coast Guard SAR mission, does anybody know, and I'll give you guys a chance to try to answer here. I like to have a little more of an interactive class versus me just talking at you guys, but does anybody know what USC or US Code gives us the responsibility to conduct SAR, or tells us that the Coast Guard will conduct SAR? Someone who's going to be taking the board, not someone, I know there's a lot of people on here watching to maybe refresh or just stop in and say hi, but someone who's going to take the board, does anybody know? Anybody? Well, there's a little bit of delay here, so. Nope, not 701. Right, so Tyler Vanderhayden, you have some of the old codes there, 14 USC 2 and 88. Those have been changed. So they've been updated to new codes. 14 USC 102, good job, Mr. Bergeron. So what that says is that Coast Guard promotes safety on, over, and under the high seas and navigable waters subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. The Coast Guard is authorized by law to develop, establish, maintain, and operate search and rescue facilities. So make sure you guys know that. It's 14 USC 102, so I see a couple people are coming in there with the right answer now. So what it says is that we are authorized by law to develop, establish, maintain, and operate search and rescue facilities. And then there's another one, 14 USC 521. Does anybody know generally what that says? Under 521? So Jeremy Bossinger says that all coast 41018 was where the changes to the USCs were. That's correct. So we're changed from 2 and 88 to 102 and 521. But does anybody know what 521 says? So 102 establishes the facilities, and then 521 says... All right, so 521 states that this is where we're authorized to perform search and rescue, but there's a however there. There's no legal obligation for us to perform or undertake any particular mission. So we can do search and rescue, but we're not required by law to actually perform search and rescue. So word for word, what it says is the Coast Guard is authorized to perform any and all acts necessary to rescue and aid any persons and to protect and save property at any time and at any place where its facilities and personnel are available and can be effectively used. However, there is no legal obligation for the Coast Guard to undertake any particular rescue mission. All right, so the program objectives of SAR is, number 1, minimize loss of life, injury, and property or loss of damage in the maritime environment. Minimize crew risk during search and rescue missions. optimize use of resources in conducting search and rescue, and maintain a world leadership in maritime SAR. So that's the Coast Guard's objectives with search and rescue. Okay, so does anybody know the officer in charge's responsibilities in accordance with Boat Manual Volume 1 with search and rescue? What are we required to do as COs and officers in charge? So if we think back to 14 U.S.C. 102, that kind of leads us in the right direction. So Matt Williams says, maintain competencies training to perform SAR, which he's on the right track there, but he's not hidden everything there. Anybody else want to take a guess? Help him out? All right, so we shall make every effort to ensure unit boats, equipment, and personnel are prepared and available to respond to urgent and planned missions within the limits of unit's capabilities. All right, so we have a SAR chain of command. So one of the questions that's often asked on boards is, what is the lowest level that SMC can be delegated? Does anybody know what the lowest level that SMC can be delegated down to? Can you, as the officer in charge, ever be SMC? So J.C. Lloyd says the response department head. That's not correct there. Matthew Johnson says sector. Joey Habel says sector. That is, so sector is the correct answer. Enforcement and response department head are incorrect. Jacob Bryant says no. I believe he's answering my question is, can you as the OIC ever be SMC? And that's correct. You could not be SMC as the officer in charge. However, can you conduct your own single unit resource at your own unit level? So I'll give you an example, kind of what I'm asking here. So let's say that you get a call, and there's a boat that's right outside the station, and they need to be towed. You guys do a MARB. Nobody responds to the MARB, so you guys go out and your crew tows them in. Can you guys do that as a single unit resource case and not involve SMC from the sector? Cameron Hayward says yes. Anybody else want to take a guess on that? All right, so we're getting a little bit of comments, a couple comments here. So Cameron says, run it, keep sector informed along the way. And Richard Sargent says, yes, as long as a reasonable time has passed with assistance. So Cameron Haywood is more correct here. As long as you're keeping sector informed, you're good. But the actual textbook answer is as long as there's no search planning efforts that are required, and as long as you keep sector informed, you can go ahead and run that as a single unit resource case. As long as the only tests that need to be done are sit reps and missile data entry, there's no search planning required, then you can run it as a single unit case. You keep SMC informed. Then you can do that at your level. But the lowest level that you can delegate SMC down is at the sector level. Don't get confused on like, oh, it has to be the RDH or oh, it has to be in the enforcement chief. Anybody at the sector level can be SMC. There's some sectors where you might have like the senior chief, command center supervisor, who is SMC qualified. There's no pay grade associated with who it can be. It just has to be the sector level. So don't be confused on like, oh, it has to be a certain person at the sector. Does that make sense to everybody? And then also the person who's SMC has to be outside of the command center watch team. So if, you know, if I'm the CDO and I also have SMC qualification, I can't be SMC and the CDO in the same watch. So it has to be pre-designated and they have to be outside the watch team. All right, so a lot of people, I mean, this is really basic stuff. We learned this as a BM3 break-in coxswain. But the 3 emergency phases of SAR, for some reason I see a lot of people get tripped up on this a lot on the boards. So what are the 3 emergency phases of SAR? All right, Mr. Kopshiver says uncertainty, alert, and distress. Good job. All right, so sometimes the question on the board might not be as simple as, you know, what are the 3 phases of SAR? You might get like a question where it's like, what phase of SAR is associated with the term apprehension? So make sure you know the definitions, make sure you know how to decipher which phase of SAR we're in, and you know what that actually means. Don't just, you know, be able to say, okay, uncertainty, alert, distress, uncertainty, alert, distress, because make sure you actually know. And then, yeah, so Adam Smith says, what are the pro words for each? So, like I said, make sure you know the definitions for each. So, uncertainty is knowledge of a situation that does not require moving resources. I mean, there's more to it than that, but it's, you know, the phase exists when there is knowledge of a situation that may need to be monitored or have more information gathered, but that does not require moving resources. So I remember it, knowledge of a situation does not require moving resources. And then with alert, the key word is apprehension. I always remember A and A, alert, apprehension. But it's the phase exists when a craft or a person is experiencing some difficulty and may need assistance, but is not in immediate danger or in need of immediate response. Apprehension is usually associated with the alert phase. And then distress is grave or imminent danger requiring immediate response. But the full definition is this phase exists when grave or imminent danger required immediate response. The distress scene threatens a craft or person. So memorize those, know your definitions, be able to talk about them. If they give you a scenario, be able to, you know, decipher what phase you're in, and then know that during a case, you can move between phases, right? A situation can become worsening, and then you can move to, you know, you could have been in the alert phase, but now you're in the distress phase, or based on scant or unreliable information, you can think that you're in the distress phase, but then you get on scene, you assess the situation, and then you realize, oh, we're actually not in the distress phase. We might be actually in the alert phase, right? So one thing that happens a lot is, you know, your crew gets a call, the OD gets a call, or the duty coxswain, however you run it at your station, and they're like, hey, I'm in the distress phase. So they launch. Who determines what phase of SAR you're in? Who makes the determination? Anybody? Who determines what phase of SAR we're in? The mariner, the duty coxswain, the OD, you as the officer in charge, sector commander, district command center. Anyone? Bueller? Can you guys still hear me? Can you guys hear me? Anyone? Okay. So I don't know if you guys don't know the answer, but nobody's answering my question. So I'm going to give you guys the answer. So the classification of what phase of SAR we're in is SMC. SMC determines what phase of SAR we're in. So with that being said, is there anything that stops you from launching your boats, or from your duty coxswain from launching to get on scene to prevent a worsening situation from happening? Or is there anything that prevents you from launching your asset to go assess the situation to get eyes on? Okay, so yes, you do not need permission to. I'm not going to read that there, Mr. Johnson, because I hate that terminology. But yes, you can send the boat. You can go launch. You can get on scene. You can make a better assessment of the scene. You can report back what you see, and then you can reclassify the you can pass that information to SMC and help them reclassify what phase of SAR you're in. Self-launch is not a term. It is nowhere in the SAR addendum. I fight that battle every day. Now that I'm, a CDO in the command center, I still try to tell these people every day that term does not exist. Stations do not self-launch. Nowhere does that say that they cannot get underway to prevent a worsening situation. So launch your assets, get on scene. We're here to save lives. Go save lives. That's what we exist for. So that kind of leads me into the question that someone posed earlier in the day, which was whether or not your boat stuff is underway. They're doing an RBS patrol. I don't remember word for word what the question was, but they were doing an RBS patrol, and they stumbled upon a boat that was disabled and needed to be towed. There was no commercial salvage in the area. Would you allow your break-in coxswain to tow them in? And there was a good discussion going there, and within the policy, absolutely they could tow them in. So the right way to do this is you're gonna ask Scepter to put out a MARB. You're going to a reasonable amount of time, which some people answered the question. What a reasonable amount of time is generally stated as 10 minutes within the SAR addendum. A bunch of people had said 15 minutes. That's incorrect. Make sure you know your MARB times for the board. The reasonable amount of time is 10 minutes, and then a reasonable amount of time is generally defined as 1 hour to get on scene. But it also later defines a time to get on scene is what is normal within your AOR, and then it says generally an hour. But if it takes, you're out, somewhere pretty remote, your AOR is pretty remote, and it takes an hour and a half to get on scene generally for salvage or something like that in your AOR, then that's a reasonable amount of time for your AOR. So make sure you know that for your AOR. Nobody's gonna, say like, oh, well, you didn't wait an hour and a half, so you're outside of policy. It's, it writes that 1 hour to kind of protect us. But remember, the MARB is not only there for commercial salvage. The MARB is also there to protect us from engaging in non-routine operations, so that our crew is ready and available when we do have to respond to other higher priority missions. So people like to say, oh, to urgent SAR, so that we can respond to urgent SAR. Well, urgent SAR is not a thing either. It's just like self-launching. Self-launching, urgent SAR, those are terms that we like to throw around. Those things don't exist. So maybe we could say to when we have to respond to a distress case, that might be a better way to say that, so that our crew is rested and available to respond to a distress case. But in the scenario that, I forget who posted it earlier, call the sector, ask them to put the MARB out, we wait 10 minutes, hey, we're setting up the deck, it takes us 10 minutes to set up the deck. Nobody responds to the MARB, yep, absolutely, I can respond to this case, I'm going to tow them in, it's great training for the crew, I'm going to continue on with my RBS patrol later in the day. No problem, you're well within policy, you're building relationships within the community, everybody's happy, it's a win-win, right? This is where you have to, as a OIC, operate within the gray area and make those decisions, those leadership and those judgment calls, and make sure that you're making those choices that are in alignment with your command philosophy that they're going to be asking you at the beginning of the board. But anyways, that leads me into the MSAP, which is the Maritime SAR Assistance Policy. The MSAP is the result of an effort enacted by Congress in 1982. It directed the Commandant to review Coast Guard policies and procedures for towing and salvage of disabled vessels in order to further minimize the possibility of Coast Guard competition or interference with commercial enterprise. The review was directed because of congressional concern that Coast Guard resources were being used unnecessarily to provide non-emergency assistance to disabled vessels that could be adequately performed by the private sector. So make sure you're familiar with the MSAP. The big things are non-distress, know your MARB times, like I said, reasonable amount of time, 10 minutes, reasonable amount of time to get on scene, generally defined as 1 hour, or what is normal within your AOR, as determined by SMC. So if it's non-distress, you're going to notify the mariner, advise them and seek their desires, ask if it appears there's no immediate danger. The Coast Guard policy is sorry, let me slow down here. Let them know what the Coast Guard policy is, and tell them that you're going to defer them to an alternate responder. Let them know that we will assist them in seeking other assistance, either through a friend, a marina, a commercial provider. Don't ask them if they have towboat insurance. I hear a lot of watch centers say, "Oh, do you have towboat insurance?" Well, just ask them a commercial provider. That's the correct way to do it. And if they decline that, you can also, you ask them a second time. At that point, if they decline it, Coast Guard has no obligation to continue to do anything for them. Let them know, okay, you declined it, you declined the MARB, okay, we don't even have to monitor. Now, we're in the life-saving business, so typically what we're going to do is set up a comm schedule with them and continue to monitor, but under the policy, under Chapter 4, page 4, Tech 9, we have no obligation to even maintain a comm schedule with them. Now, if the situation deteriorates, then yeah, we have to, we're going to respond because we're no longer in the non-distress phase, right? The 10 factor. So there's 10 things that go in to determine whether or not they're non-distress or distress. It's figure 4 tech 1 in the SAR addendum. It's a tiny little flow chart that is used by SMC to determine whether or not it's distress or non-distress. You'll hear CDOs, you'll hear SMC, you'll hear OUs talk about the 10 factor over and over and over again. Maybe you've heard it in your time in the Coast Guard as a bosun mate. But if you go to the SAR addendum, it's mentioned in one place on this little flow chart, and it's like an OS is like eat, breathe, and sleep, this 10 factor. And it's funny to me because it's like this one spot in the SAR addendum and it's like tiny. So if you hit Control F, you're going to have a really hard time finding it. But if you go to figure 4 tech 1, that's where you're going to find the 10 factor. And it's basically the nature of the situation, the reported conditions of the vessel, position accuracy or lack thereof, visibility including daylight, tide and current conditions, present and forecasted weather, special considerations, reliable comms, degree of apprehension of the people on board, and potential of the situation to worsen. And so even if we, decide it's non-distress, we're going to MARB them. These 10 factors are what we're going to be monitoring as CDOs and OUs and SMC. And if these things change, we can then move into the distress phase, and then that's where we're going to be launching the assets from the stations to go respond. Or even, if we determine one of these things are, high enough on our spidey senses here, we're going to decide that, hey, we're not in the non-distress phase. Or if we go back to the scenario that was posted earlier today, if we can, validate any one of these things, then we can tell our crew right then, hey, yeah, absolutely, hook them up and tow them in. Potential for the situation to worsen. I think there was like a lot of traffic around, right? Hey, there's a lot of traffic. We need to get this guy out of here before he gets hit by another boat. Anchor's not holding. There's a lot of apprehension from the people on board because of the boat traffic around here. I'm going to tow them in for their safety. Any one of those things. And you can be operating, in that gray area and justify why you do what you're doing. So, know the 10 factor, understand the 10 factor, and use it to justify why you're doing what you're doing when determining whether you're in distress or non-distress. Hopefully that makes sense. And then also, one thing I wanted to hit on too is with the reasonable amount of time, just because you hit 10 minutes doesn't mean we need to launch an asset, or just because we hit 1 hour doesn't mean that we need to launch an asset. Absolutely, you can leave somebody out there all night. You can leave somebody out there all day. That's just the guideline that says, hey, we now can and we don't have to worry about interfering with commercial enterprise. Hope that makes sense. All right, so I saw another question on there earlier about forcible evacuation that someone posted earlier in the day. Can we forcibly evacuate somebody from a vessel during a search and rescue case? So, for example, the master's like, nope, I'm going down with my boat. I'm not leaving. You can't make me get off the boat. So, absolutely we can. However, voluntary evacuation is the preferred method. And then, so this is often a question asked on the board. And, we'll run you through a scenario usually with this. Who has the authority to forcibly evacuate someone from the vessel? By policy, it's SC's authority, which is Access Authority. The SAR addendum still says SC, but by policy, that's going to be, they're trying to change that in the newest SAR addendum that's going to come out to change that SC terminology to Access Authority, because by definition, SC is really your district commander. So they even though the district commander isn't standing your Access Authority duty. So Access Authority is technically the person who has the authority to forcibly evacuate someone from the vessel. But in real-time situations, obviously if I'm the duty coxswain and this boat's going down, I don't have time to say, hey, let me talk to the OU, to talk to the CDO, to talk to the SMC, to get me, to the district command center, to get me on the phone with Access to say, hey, this boat's going down, I need your permission to get this person off the boat, and, send my boarding team over to get him off. So it's just like with the medevac, the ultimate authority is going to lie with the coxswain, and, forcefully evacuate them. And then as soon as possible, as soon as practical, you're going to back brief the Access Authority, SC, and let them know, hey, I had to forcefully evacuate this person to save their life. I was going to let them go down with the vessel. Does that make sense? Hopefully. So you're back brief SMC and SC, but ultimately the authority lies with SC, aka Access Authority. And obviously, while doing that, your boarding team needs to use the use of force policy, and then make sure that they log it in a SITREP, and that goes to CG SAR. And briefly want to touch on the firefighting policy. Make sure you guys know the firefighting policy. Usually there's a quick question on the firefighting policy on every board I've seen. I usually like to try to think about it like very basic and then work my way up. So like, okay, is the fire on a Coast Guard boat? Yep, we're going to take action. We're going to fight the fire. We're going to save lives. We're going to save our own boat. And then, so Coast Guard personnel shall be prepared and respond to fires on board Coast Guard vessels. Easy, right? For other maritime firefighting situations, COs and OICs of Coast Guard units shall adopt a conservative response posture. They shall focus their actions on those traditional Coast Guard activities not requiring unit personnel to enter in a hazardous environment. So we all know, like, is it the size of a trash can? Use a fire extinguisher, put it out, then we can fight it, right? And then independent firefighting. Coast Guard personnel shall not engage in independent firefighting operations except to do what? So it's on another boat. Like, when can we fight it? We're out in the middle of the ocean. We get a call. This boat's on fire. 3 people on board. What can we do to fight this fire? Like, what's the limitations? Station gets a call. There's a boat on fire 2 miles offshore. 3 people on board. What can your crew do to respond? What are the limitations? "30-foot Sea Ray cabin cruiser, 3 people on board. 2 miles offshore. Anyone? Alright, so the Coast Guard shall not engage in independent firefighting operations except to save a life or in the early stages of a fire. Right? And then what if it's at a waterfront facility? So different call, station gets a call that such and such marina is on fire. You know, they want you to respond. What are the limitations there? Alright, so the Coast Guard shall not actively engage in firefighting except in support of a regular firefighting agency under the supervision of a qualified fire officer, right? You can do support activities, you can help set up a safety zone. If the fire officer is requesting our support, we can assist, but other than that, like, we can keep boats out of the way, we can set up a safety zone, things like that, but unless we're acting under the supervision of a qualified fire officer, we really can't do anything, right? Alright. So what's the difference between a medico and a medevac? Alright, so medico is medical advice. That's usually transmitted over the radio. And a medevac is the actual evacuation of a person either to a small boat or to a helicopter. And who has the final authority to determine whether or not you're going to medevac somebody? Do you have to obtain permission from the flight surgeon to medevac somebody? Alright, so you should try to obtain the permission from the flight surgeon. We're always going to be briefing it up to the flight surgeon. However, the final resting authority is from the commanding officer of a cutter, the duty coxswain, or the aircraft commander. they make the final determination, and they can conduct the medevac without obtaining permission from the flight surgeon. But you're still going to back brief the flight surgeon, just like with the forceful evacuation. If you need to do it, go ahead and do it, and then just make sure you're doing your back briefs as soon as practical. All right, so just want to touch on some search pattern review real quick. This should be, you know, second nature to everybody that's in the classroom, but make sure that you guys are well briefed on this, when you're going to use what search pattern, what each search pattern is used for, and then obviously like what each letter represents for your search pattern. So parallel pattern, you know, represented, the first letter of search patterns represents the type of pattern. The second letter represents how many SRUs are in it. So, you know, a PS, single unit. So P is parallel, obviously, are best adapted to rectangular or square areas and have straight legs that are usually aligned parallel to the major axis. So parallel to the major axis. They're normally used for large, fairly level search areas where only approximate initial position is known and uniform coverage is desired. So parallel to the major axis, large search areas, uniform coverage is desired. If you can remember those things, then you'll be pretty good with that. Track line, represented by T for track line. So you have track line, single unit return, single unit non-return, and then sometimes you'll know like the R can also, instead of return, it can be radar. And then it's the route of the search object if it's known. So if you know they went from point A to point B, you're going to travel the same route. If they went point A to point B and then back to point A, then you're going to do a return. Creeping line, C, specialized type of parallel pattern where the direction of the creep is along the major axis. Unlike the parallel pattern, they are used to cover one end of an area first or change direction of the search legs where sun glare or swell direction makes this necessary. So it's basically the difference between, it's going to run perpendicular to the major axis, and then you want a large amount of coverage, and then your search object's predicted to be at one end or the other. Your square patterns, which are represented by S, a small area when some doubt exists about the distress position, more uniform coverage than a sector search may be expanded. And then your sector patterns, which are Vs. These patterns may be used when datum is established within close limits. A very high coverage is desired in the immediate vicinity of datum, and the area to be searched is not extensive. So speaking of datum, someone had asked earlier what the definition of datum was. There's a couple different answers on there. When I looked at it last, I don't think anybody had the actual correct definition. So make sure you guys are looking that up. And you guys know that, because that's like one of those softball questions that are going to be thrown at you probably at the very beginning of the board, just to help you take your breath, get settled in, make sure what's the 3-minute rule, what's the 6-minute rule, what's the definition of datum. Those are like softball questions to make sure you guys are comfortable with the board setting. Make sure, hey, these are easy questions. Okay, I feel good. I know what I'm doing here. I can take a deep breath. Okay, I'm settled in now. So make sure you guys are good with those questions going to the board. You know what I mean? And then what is track spacing? The distance between two parallel adjacent legs. Know what that is. Know what that means. And then the last question that I saw posted right before I started doing this lesson was, I don't remember what it was, but Bosun Sova had posted it. And it was something about two young girls were out swimming on a beach. They started drowning. The one girl was holding on to another one. You pulled them on board, started doing CPR on one. Are you going to allow your boat crew to beach the 29 to get them back in, or something like that? And that question goes to warranted risk. And so this is really important to know and understand. And warranted risk is, the answer to this is in the boat manual, and you really need to know the definitions of warranted risk, know the definition of warranted risk, and then be able to break warranted risk down for the different criteria. So damaging boats, whether or not we're going to save property or whether or not we're saving lives, and things like that. So if you guys don't know what warranted risk is, you really need to get it into the books and study this, and know when it's okay to put assets in danger and put other people's lives in danger to save lives and at the expense of the mission, if that makes sense. So warranted risk. Coast Guard operations are inherently complex, dynamic, dangerous, and by nature involve the acceptance of some level of risk. However, the decision to accept risk must balance the potential gains of conducting the activity or mission with the inherent risk of the operation. So you should probably memorize that, or at least be able to, in your own words, spit that out. And then damage to or sacrifice of the boat is acceptable risk in the defense of the United States, its citizens, and or installations. So in defense of the United States, or in defense of our citizens or installations, it's acceptable risk to damage or sacrifice the boat. The probability of saving human life warrants a maximum effort. So right there to answer Bosun Sova's question, absolutely, beach the boat. Go save this little girl's life. You're going to get her to EMS, save her life. Who cares about the boat, right? We're here to save lives. Like, nobody's going to question you. Nobody cares about the 29 at the end of the day. Like, did you save a life? Did you try to save a life? It warrants a maximum effort. The possibility of saving human life or the probability of preventing or relieving intense pain or suffering warrants the risk of damage to or abuse of the boat if recovering the boat can reasonably be expected. The probability of saving property of the United States or its citizens warrants the risk of damage to the boat if the value of property to be saved is questionably greater than the cost of the boat damage, and the boat is fully expected to be recoverable. So if you're going to save property and the damage to the boat is going to be less than the value of the property that you're going to save, and the boat is expected to be recoverable, then you can damage the boat. And then the possibility of recovering evidence and interdicting or apprehending alleged violators of federal law does not warrant probable damage to or abuse of the boat unless in defense of self or others. So if you want to do a law enforcement mission, you cannot damage the boat. To go apprehend violators of law or to collect evidence or anything else, unless you're doing it in defense of self or others. Does that make sense? So you want to save a life, do it to save a life. You want to do it to save property, you can do it to save property as long as the damage you're going to do to the Coast Guard boat is less than the property you're going to save, and we're likely to recover the Coast Guard asset. If you're going to do it for law enforcement, don't do it unless you're doing it in defense of self or others. And if you're doing it in defense of the United States or its citizens or installations, then you can damage the boat. If you think about the MSST or the PSU mission, then yep, you can damage the boat. Save a life? Absolutely, that's what we're here to do. And that is all I had for today on SAR policies. If there's any other questions you guys have, feel free to reach out. Again, Chapter 4 of the SAR addendum, a little bit, like I said, in the boat manual, but your main study reference for the SAR policy is going to be Chapter 4 of the SAR addendum. So I'll stick around here for a couple minutes and see if you guys had any questions for me, and we'll go from there. Thanks for tuning in. Doesn't look like there's many questions, so I think I'm going to sign off here. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.